Has the science and technology of behavior really helped in determining the directions of our lives? If behavioral technologies are to control our society, rules of conduct, ethics must be established. What are the ethics that will guide the values and goals we try to achieve? What is the relationship of individual freedom to the survival of the culture? What are the ethics of the behavioral revolution?
We should be concerned about who is doing what to whom and why. I mean, how come people are being modified? Do they want to be modified or don't they? Now, if they want to be modified, then by and large there is no ethical issue in a free society.
Thomas Szasz is a psychiatrist, teacher, and author. He has often criticized the institution of psychology as a tool of political and social coercion. B.F. Skinner, the most influential and controversial psychologist of our time, calls for behavioral technology to control and ensure survival of the culture.
Well, of course, you fear control because you think of the ways you've been controlled, which are almost always punitive or at least exploiting. You don't want to be controlled by punishment. You don't want to be controlled by someone who robs you as a result, or exploited, or despoils you. And so you're against control because those are what you think of as control. But your teacher controlled you, your family controlled you. If you're religious, you were controlled by your church or by your government and so on. Much of this you accept and are very glad that it happened. This is still a form of control. Well, you want to say, oh, why not call it influence or some softer word? But why not face the fact and then deal with it? And I think you ought to face the fact that it is a form of control.
The author of over 30 books, Anthony Burgess, shocked the public with A Clockwork Orange by depicting the use of exotic behavioral techniques to conform criminals to society's rules.
And I come back to the old question, the old objection, quis custodiet ipsos custodes? Who is going to guard our guardians? Who is going to modify the people who are going to modify us?
Bertram S. Brown is director of the National Institute of Mental Health, a federal agency that supports many areas of psychological research and therapy.
Another area, of course, is the setting. And that perhaps is the one that has the most heat around it. Can you use behavior modification techniques in, say, a prison? That is a problem really that whether anybody in a prison can give informed consent for these types of techniques.
How can you change when they're making you? I mean, it's mostly a thing where everybody just doing is front. You know? Like, you might not want to get in that program. But just because he says you're supposed to get in it, you got to get in it. And you might not even need that.
In order to get anywhere in here, you have to participate in some type of program. So actually, I was forced to see.
Well, I've never been in one, but they're trying to force me to get in one. I don't know, I just see my counselor disappointed. In order to become eligible for furlough, he keeps insisting that I have to participate in some kind of group therapy program. Is that common? Sir? Is that common? Yes, it's practically mandatory. In order, to become eligible for pre-release, furlough, just about anything around here.
How do they decide what kind of therapy program you should be in?
I don't know. They got these counselors. I guess they decide.
Nobody is required to be in a program. If he didn't get involved in a program, when his sentence would expire, his maximum sentence, he would be released. And if he does use it effectively, then he's able to gain the further rewards. Prisons are not supposed to be nice places. It's a place to hold people for a time, evaluate what their needs are, identify this with them, identify programs that they can use to develop skills to meet their particular needs for coping with the demands of life, and eventually return them to society better equipped to be able to deal with the pressures of society. At the end of the 6-week total stay, after his first day here, the initial assessment team meets with him. And it's at that time that the clinic supervisor, the man's zone counselor, and the block officer sit down and work out his program.
Now, in terms of treatment programs, the only thing I have to recommend at this point is that you continue with AA.
Well, this I fully intend to do. As you know, when I was here before, I wasn't.
They also work out the contract in which he states what changes he wants to make and what are the programs that he can use to help make those particular changes.
Well, we ought to look at some other things that we could maybe get you involved in here too, in addition. It does look like, you know, sometimes you get uptight, tense, things bother you. That's when you start to drink. And we have a program here that, you know, might help. And it's a group counseling situation that trains you in relaxation skills. Maybe you can work on this thing and get rid of some of this sensitization to these sorts of things, and you won't have that urge to drink so much.
Well, like I say, I'll do anything if I can. If things can just straighten out for me. I know that I got some problems, personal problems that I got to conquer, and I think this is going to be a good way to do this. And
well, society is really the client, but every inmate is a member of society. He may not be a law-abiding member of society, but he's still a member of society, and he's going to eventually return to society, so that our focusing on him as an individual is not to the detriment of the total society. We're trying to help society through the individuals. Our immediate attention is to the inmate to try to do that which is going to help him. But eventually, society is going to be the beneficiary of it.
I certainly think if society feels that they have the right to take away a person's freedom for very antisocial or criminal behavior, that there is some right, in my conservative opinion, to try to change that behavior.
Carolyn Payton is chairperson of the Committee on Ethics for the American Psychological Association. The committee sets standards, investigates complaints, and seeks resolutions to ethical issues.
I think there are psychologists who would be concerned with helping the individual to become adjusted, when in essence what he's doing is helping the individual to be content with some of the ills and the wrongs that ought to be corrected.
I see as my client both people here, actually. I'm hired to consult with the staff and develop programs. But I see the people who I work directly with as my clients. Prisoners, I think from the judge on down, often face messages such as, you have to get therapy, either implying something's dreadfully wrong with you, or we at least want to treat you somehow. And so they're told, you got to get therapy.
You are before the parole board. The Rockview staff has recommended you for parole. But one person from the parole board looks you straight in the eyes and says, somehow I have a gut level feeling you won't make it on parole.
How can you say that?
Well, there's your past record hasn't improved very much.
Past record. I mean, that, like you said, past record. You don't know what the future's going to hold.
They also know that it's good for the parole board to hear that you've been involved in therapy programs. My own feeling about it is, if that's the way it's set up, then it behooves people in the institutions to offer the best possible variety of programs they can so that people can satisfy those requirements. The guys want parole. If it takes programs for them to get it, we should provide the programs, the best ones we can think of, the ones they're most interested in, offer them and let them take them. So when someone comes into my groups because he needs it on his record, he's welcome.
I look at it different now, you know, since I got to be here, I got to make the best of it. You know, like on the outside, man, I got a wife and kids and stuff, you know, but I think I can make it. You know.
Did you have a wife and a child when you first came in here?
No, not really.
You really think you're going to make it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Feeling. But if you can feed me evidence about yourself, saying positive things about you, and still allowing that I sure enough could have a gut level feeling, you're more likely to change my impression. You're more likely to come on stronger. The arguing with me is sort of Mack trucking it to no advantage, because you really can't win the argument. Whitman's a gut-level feeling I'm telling you about.
Right. Okay, but that guy sitting there, he don't know me.
Right.
All right, then he can't say he has a feeling that I can't make it out there. He don't know that.
But these kinds of things happen all the time. People say things that they predict about you, which, how can he know that? He doesn't really know me. But for him to know you may help him, and so you tell him about you.
Well, prison as such is punishment, but the therapy programs are rehabilitation. You couldn't take a group of people who committed a crime and put them in a therapy group and satisfy the social views of the public, because the public wouldn't accept that they were being punished. And the public, I feel, looks for punishment as well as rehabilitation.
What are you doing this for? We are going to remake men, criminals. Well, let's ask you, we're going to remake Jesus Christ. He was a criminal. And Socrates, he was a criminal. What are you going to remake them into?
James Holland is a member of the American Psychological Association's Commission on Behavior Modification, a group formed to uncover abuses and establish guidelines for professional conduct.
Often the psychologist steps in as a third party in that arrangement and works for the established power to manipulate the person below. And so you have a stratification of power and a manipulation of the powerless. And this is, a kind of an oppressive procedure. And I think that this is really very common when you analyze it.
The more we talk about technology, the more we confuse ourselves, because we should first talk about goals.
I don't think the society has any right to goals. I think goals are essentially an individual matter. I have certain goals which are aesthetic. Other people have goals which are technological, goals of pure knowledge. But I don't think we can talk about the goal of a society. The task of a society is to make life moderately safe and free for its individual components.
Survival of the culture is, I think, the only criterion that we can possibly turn to with any real validity. Meanwhile, we can say something, well, I want people to be happy. Well, all right, yes, it's better for people to be happy, but you can be too happy at a time when a little anxiety might be a good thing, and so on. And in the long run, I think nothing but survival is of value.
The underlying assumption is that society is more important than its component members. Now, rightly or wrongly, this I cannot accept.
My own preference is that individual liberty is a very important value and is more important than so-called collective security.
We're going through a phase right now in which social institutions are being played down for the aggrandizement of the individual. We no longer pay much attention to government. We defect or not patriotic. We no longer pay any attention to religion. We no longer work. We can go off and be hobos or hippies in communes and so on. We don't bother going to school. We're going to de-school society and so on. And the result of this is that all of the practices which have made it likely that our group will survive are being destroyed for the sake of individual gratification.
Thank you. Activities for Wednesday, April 30, 1975. 5:30 morning meeting, exercises, lunch.
The Community Mental Health Center is a growing concept in the delivery of care. Alternative 2, an outpatient daycare facility in South Philadelphia, uses a variety of behavioral techniques to deal with people who would ordinarily be confined to a state mental hospital or who might not receive any treatment at all.
3 o'clock, Achievement Project.
We're having a fossil trip next week. We have trips scheduled for every second week from May 6th through the end of August. And places we have scheduled.
Certainly the technology is powerful enough, particularly in a controlled environment, that it can be extremely controlling and detrimental to the person on whom it's being done. The fact that we have a powerful technology, though, should not stop us from using it as long as there are reasonable ethical concerns. My problem is how do you guarantee those ethical concerns? Dr. Skinner, of course, feels that there are reinforcements that control the controllers. I'm not as sanguine as he is about the efficacy of such controls.
Is there any old business? Meeting is adjourned. Exercise.
Everybody up. 10 toe touches. You ready? Here we go. And 1, 2, and 3.
My particular concern ethically is to walk the line between telling somebody how they must behave and allowing them to kind of develop in a way that's most suitable for them. There are certain pressures on us as mental health therapists to produce a product that gets along in the culture and that is the least burden on the system. Another one of my ethical considerations is the ease with which we can oppress people who come here because they have the product of this mental health care system. And as recently as 7 or 8 years ago, there were no controls at all, particularly in inpatient units in which you could do anything to people. This program is called alternative too because, as I have said, it's an alternative to hospitalization or being strange out in the streets. Is the day program for the Community Mental Health Center. It's one of the 5 mandated services necessary for a community mental health center. This particular community mental health center is associated with the Department of Psychiatry of Thomas Jefferson University, which is basically a medical school. The one thing common to everybody, which includes severe neurotics, severely psychotics, acutely psychotic, chronically psychotic, the one thing in common is that they all have difficulty in coping with the outside world.
Did you start real good first? Yeah. Okay, just keep going. Okay. I'll get that.
Lily, on this one that broke up,
Make
sure you put a whole lot of glaze. Blue glaze. You put a whole lot of it around the bottom of it.
Our structure here is designed to teach people how to cope by teaching them behaviors which are more appropriate than the ones they're now engaging in. Okay, so that means if somebody is taking their clothes off and they do it in the middle of Broad Street, that's inappropriate. However, that same behavior in context, say at home, is an appropriate thing, and we try to teach them the discrimination between where to do a behavior and which behaviors they are socially acceptable versus which ones are primarily a private kind of thing.
Unfortunately, it's not good. Are these over here, are these to be fired? That one?
No,
Now, what's wrong with that?
They won't stay.
Would you want to take some sandpaper and sand it down so it has a little flatter bottom? Like this, so it won't tip over?
I don't know if that'll stay.
Because I get tokens over the okay. Sam, you weren't here the whole time, so you don't get tokens. You get tokens.
Does everybody have to get something?
The program, I think, can best be described as a 3-level social reinforcement token economy system. The token economy is nested in a social reinforcement structure. That means that we are using a kind of miniature economic system to reward behaviors which are considered appropriate by us.
Yeah. For this week?
The monopoly money, as you call it, is not really a fake kind of money. What we hope here is to use this, what we call tokens, we take them very seriously, to reinforce and train people here to emit certain kinds of behaviors which we feel will stand them in good stead on the outside. As such, we don't really make a judgment as to what someone ought to believe or should believe or needs to believe, but simply that that is the way the world is, as seen through our eyes, of course.
Well, we've been there since yesterday.
It's constantly explained to a person that they are allowed and encouraged to change if they wish to, but the only thing that we tell them is that they need to learn how to cope with the outside world. through being here. Notice I don't say adjust because I'm not too happy about the world the way it is. But coping is another story. We can only patch rather than reconstruct, I'm afraid, because of the limited way in which we can deal with a segment of the world.
I don't get along with my family. My mother, father, sister, or brother. His sister and brother don't live at home. I just started living at home 6 weeks ago. I was in the hospital from December the 18th until March the 18th.
Where?
Norristown State. And I was supposed to be there a year. I was in their halfway house program at townhouse. And I met a man there that I fell in love with, and he fell in love with me, and it was a no-no. And they were going to throw me out of the program, either throw me out of the program or put me back in admission building on lithium, and I wasn't about to do that, so I just signed myself out of MA. And now I'm back in the hospital again, and I'm fucked up.
How are you fucked up?
I can't live.
I don't understand that. Can you clear it up for me? I'm not sure what you mean.
I don't get along with my parents. I just don't get along with them. I cried and carried on yesterday something terrible when I came to pick up my clothes. So I hope it works out.
How do you not get along with them? That's the thing. How do you not...
Fight with them. And this time it was a fist fight battle. My father called the cops because I was beating up my mother, and the cops didn't do anything to me. They just talked to me.
What is it? What is the stuff that sets you off? Lots of people have fights with their family, but they don't wind up in the hospital.
All my father has to do is open his mouth, or me open my mouth, and it starts a fight. He's impossible. He weighs 325 pounds and picks on me when I eat. And he constantly tells me I'm living in his house and he can do what he damn well pleases, and I'm just a guest and I know I'm unwelcome there. I can't make it on my own. I tried. I lived in an apartment for 1.5 years and they paid my rent. It couldn't work.
See, what I'm noticing is here you're crying and you really you're supposed to be upset and you're really concentrating on opening up your package of cigarettes there. I'm wondering how upset you can really be if you can concentrate on that and talking at the same time.
There are 3 quite specific things that, as a philosopher, disturb me about behavioral technology. The first of these is the demonstrated lack of a critical awareness of the history and philosophy of science. Second, the tacit assumption that now we can begin to incorporate fragmentary knowledge in behavioral technology in the hope of improving man and society, even though we do not have holistic understanding. And third, that because we know how to make cameras and threshing machines better, we will automatically recognize improvements in humans and in human society.
Western societies have become more and more adept at developing how to do things, and have become more and more confused about why do we do them.
What we're talking about when we talk about operant conditioning is really the science of power. It's the means that behavior's modified and influenced, and if one person is modifying and influencing somebody else's behavior, that person's a person of power.
My view is that the so-called behavioral and modern chemical technology is not all that different from the medieval technology of beating people, putting them in dungeons, offering them rewards. Essentially, it's a system of rewards and punishments. And the rewards and punishments vary depending on the technical civilization.
Well, I don't believe that behavior modification is a set of cookbook rules about doing things, but a good behavior modifier can go into a classroom, a disrupted classroom, say, or with some so-called hyperactive children running around, and can redesign the environment to get kids to sit down and learn something. Now, I think that should be done. That helps the children, it helps everybody, it helps the administration, it helps the teacher. If you simply use it to create zombies out of students so they sit quietly and do nothing, of course that's wrong. But you've got to understand the positive things that can be done. Instead of spending so much time on how you can control behavior modification and prevent its use, spend some time on seeing what can be done with it. There are marvelous things that can be done to help people. It's just a question of helping people.
I can quite clearly see that we could live in a very happy society if Skinner had the control of it. But, of course, Aldous Huxley said the same thing. The whole point about his Brave New World is that people are happy. People are totally happy. They're happy in their stations, whether they're alpha or gamma or delta plus, whatever it happens to be. But his point, I think it's a true point, it's of course a very traditional point, is that happiness is not enough. We have the right to know sin, we have the right to know pain, we have the right to explore ourselves through media, through means other than the hedonistic. The happy society is not really the human ideal. The human ideal is the various or complex society which is a mirror of man's own complexity. Ultimately, we're best satisfied when we're aware of the complexity of texture within ourselves, which is a kind of mirror of the complexity of texture in the world outside us. Indeed, as Levi-Strauss says, we make the world outside us because of the structure of our brains. The structure of the world we see outside us is really the structure of our own brains. We accept that, I accept that. But we rejoice in the complexity of this structure, the texture of it. And this is, in a curious way, well, not in a curious way at all, but in a quite natural way, an aesthetic thing. Man is perhaps best defined in aesthetic terms rather than in any other terms you're going to think of.